For generations, the Canada-US border has symbolized trust and cooperation, especially for Alaska, which relies on a highway through British Columbia for vital supplies. But in early 2025, this stability shattered as a sudden trade dispute erupted, threatening to sever Alaska's land link to the rest of the US. What was once unthinkable, Canada restricting American access, became a looming reality, shifting the relationship from partnership to confrontation. The stakes are highest for Alaskans, whose unique geography makes them vulnerable to any disruption in their supply chain. The overland route through Canada is essential for time-sensitive goods, from groceries to oil industry parts. The threat of tolls or closures has sparked anxiety across Alaska, revealing how quickly global politics can impact daily life. This story traces the events that led to this standoff, from tariff threats to bold legislative moves in British Columbia. We'll examine the impacts on both sides and the escalating rhetoric that now threatens a century-old alliance. The unraveling of this border is a stark warning. Even the closest allies can find themselves on the brink when diplomacy fails. The crisis began in March 2025, when President Trump announced sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, calling it a response to Canadian economic aggression. His rhetoric went further, even suggesting the US should annex Canada, a move that shocked Ottawa and ignited outrage nationwide. Prime Minister Trudeau condemned the tariffs and unveiled retaliatory measures targeting key American products, signaling Canada was ready for a fight. The US later delayed some tariffs and expanded exemptions, but the threat remained, leaving North America in economic limbo. For provinces like British Columbia, the threat felt immediate and existential, prompting them to consider their own countermeasures. The dispute quickly escalated beyond economics, becoming a test of sovereignty and national resolve. The initial exchange set the stage for provinces to act, as the federal response was seen as only the first step. The American tariffs and aggressive rhetoric were viewed as a direct challenge to Canada's identity. British Columbia soon unveiled a powerful weapon of its own, targeting America's Alaskan lifeline. The trade war was no longer hypothetical. It was about to get personal. British Columbia responded with unprecedented speed, introducing the Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act, a legislative tool designed to hit back if the US escalated. Premier David Eby called the American actions a threat to Canada, and Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma made it clear this act was a shield, not a sword. The law empowers BC to impose tolls and fees on vehicles, especially commercial trucks and ferries traveling between the lower 48 and Alaska. The act isn't immediate, it's a contingency, signaling to Washington that BC can inflict real economic pain if pushed. It expires in 2027, underscoring its role as a crisis measure, not a permanent policy. The message: Canadians won't be intimidated, and Alaska's overland corridor is now a bargaining chip. This move marked a rare provincial intervention in international trade, usually the federal government's domain. But the direct impact on BC's economy and sovereignty demanded action. The act became a symbol of Canadian defiance, showing that if the US disrupts North American trade, Canada can respond in kind. The standoff had entered a new, more dangerous phase. The Alaska corridor was now a pressure point in a high-stakes game. Imposing tolls on the Alaska Highway is logistically feasible. Existing border checkpoints and weigh stations could be repurposed for toll collection. The main targets: thousands of commercial trucks carrying everything from groceries to oil equipment. BC could set tolls as flat fees, by weight, or as a percentage of cargo value, allowing for precise economic pressure. The act also covers ferries in the Alaska Marine Highway system, closing loopholes and maximizing leverage. However, the legality is murky. Historic agreements may guarantee US access, and any tolls would likely spark legal battles. BC officials are confident, but the courts could become the next battleground. The threat of tolls is as much about leverage as revenue. The Alaska corridor, once a symbol of cooperation, is now a potential choke point in a trade war. For Alaskans, tolls on the highway through BC are a direct threat to daily life. While most cargo arrives by sea, the overland route is crucial for perishable foods and urgent supplies. Any delay or cost increase would hit consumers immediately, raising grocery prices and risking shortages. Alaska's oil and gas industry also depends on fast, reliable trucking for critical parts. Disruptions could mean costly shutdowns. Small businesses already operating on thin margins would be especially vulnerable. The policy meant to punish Washington would hurt Alaska's 730,000 residents first. Alaskan leaders are urging diplomacy, but frustration is mounting as they brace for supply chain chaos. The state is caught in the crossfire, preparing for a worst-case scenario. British Columbia's move inspired a wave of provincial retaliation across Canada. Ontario, a major energy exporter, imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity sent to the US, targeting states dependent on Canadian power. Premier Doug Ford's message: economic integration is a two-way street, and Canada has leverage beyond the West. In the Yukon, Premier Ranj Pillai halted all liquor purchases from American companies and restricted US firms from government contracts. While smaller in scale, Yukon's actions showed even remote regions were willing to endure hardship for the national cause. The combined measures, BC's tolls, Ontario's energy surcharge, Yukon's procurement bans, created a united front. Canada's response was diverse and strategic, hitting the US from multiple angles. The provinces weren't just following Ottawa, they were leading the charge. The message to Washington: Canada's resolve runs deep, and the provinces are ready to fight back. Political leaders on both sides have fueled the standoff with strong words and high stakes. BC Premier David Eby framed the conflict as a defense of sovereignty, insisting the tolls are a necessary stand against US aggression. Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan called BC's move a hostile act, vowing swift retaliation and refusing to let Alaska be a pawn. Governor Mike Dunleavy urged calm, pushing for federal negotiations and warning against tit-for-tat escalation. Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma emphasized the tolls are a reluctant last resort, not an attack on Alaskans. The rhetoric is a mix of defiance, pragmatism, and hope for diplomacy. Leaders are caught between protecting their people and avoiding a spiral of retaliation. The stakes are personal for Alaskans and British Columbians alike. The border dispute is no longer just about trade. It's about identity and survival. The world is watching to see who blinks first. As Alaska's supply line faced threats, US leaders found their own leverage: the cruise ship industry. Senator Sullivan pushed to waive the Passenger Vessel Services Act, which requires foreign-flagged cruise ships to stop in BC ports en route to Alaska. If waived, ships could sail directly from Seattle to Anchorage, bypassing BC and devastating its tourism sector. In 2025, nearly 2 million cruise passengers are expected, hundreds of millions in revenue for BC at stake. The threat is real. In 2021, Congress temporarily waived the law during the pandemic, proving it can be done. Now the same tool is being wielded as an economic weapon, sending shockwaves through BC's coastal communities. The cruise ship Gambit mirrors BC's toll threat, each side targeting the other's economic lifeline. If both follow through, Alaska faces shortages and BC faces job losses. The standoff is a lose-lose, with mutual harm guaranteed if neither side backs down. The logic of escalation is perilous, and the endgame is unclear. By July 2025, the Canada-US partnership is at a breaking point, with the future hinging on diplomacy. If tariffs proceed, BC will likely impose tolls, triggering higher costs and supply disruptions for Alaska. The US would retaliate, waiving cruise ship rules and devastating BC's tourism industry. Ontario's energy surcharge and Yukon's procurement bans would add more pain, escalating the trade war. The fallout: higher prices, job losses, and a fractured relationship that took generations to build. The only way out is negotiation. Leaders must find an off-ramp before the damage becomes irreversible. The costs of conflict far outweigh any political gain. If diplomacy fails, this will be remembered as the moment two close allies chose confrontation over cooperation, and both paid the price.